Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. My name's Kat Allman. I'm with Google's Open Source Programs Office here at Google. We're happy to have with us today Paul F. Levy. Paul is a manager. You might be thinking, I'm sitting in a room about to listen to a manager, but you would be wrong. Paul is a manager the way a Stradivarius is a fiddle.
Oh.
And he's modest, too, you can tell. Under his leadership at the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, Boston Harbor, which had been dubbed the dirtiest harbor in America, was cleaned up. He then became chair and president of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. This is the teaching hospital for Harvard University and is consistently ranked as one of the best hospitals in the United States. It was here in 2009 that he, in the face of the recession, worked with his employees to crowdsource cost-saving solutions which saved hundreds of jobs, in particular for his lowest paid employees. Here and there, he has squeezed in serving as chairman of the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, executive dean of administration for Harvard Medical School. He is a member of the MIT Corporation and the board of ISO New England, and he's a 20-plus year soccer coach for youths in the Massachusetts area. This man has successfully faced down academics, hospital administrators, and roving gangs of 12-year-old girls. Paul is here today to talk to us about his book, Goal Play, Lessons from the Soccer Field. Please welcome Paul Levy.
Thank you. Thank you, Kat. It's really a pleasure to be here. I want to explain a little bit about this book and how it occurred. As Kat mentioned, for over 20 years I've been coaching girls soccer in my hometown in Newton, Massachusetts. And during that time I've also had the privilege and the luck to run a number of complex organizations, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, Mass Water Resources Authority, and so on. And what I discovered over the 20-something years of coaching girls soccer is that if you can coach an 11-year-old girls soccer team, you can run an academic medical center or any other corporation. Now, I'm not sure that says something about the emotional energy, the emotional age of doctors and other people with whom you work in a hospital. It might, but I think it says something more about the nature of human beings wherever they work and whatever they do. So I wrote this book, and the book, as you'll see, consists of a number of chapters, each of which starts with an anecdote about coaching girls soccer or refereeing soccer. And from that, I dive into some fairly serious lessons about leadership. Now, I want to start by saying that a lot of people think about leadership in terms of the CEO of an organization or the president or vice president or whatever. And certainly those are leadership positions. But I think it's more important to understand that we are all in leadership positions at some point in our lives, whether at work or in our community activities. It might just be leading a task force or a community group or whatever. It might be coaching a girls' soccer team. And so I would ask you to think broadly about the attributes that are useful to people when you're in charge, when you're the leader. And I would distinguish a little with Kat the difference between leadership and manager. A manager is someone who manages. A leader is someone who goes a little further than that and acts in a way that actually inspires the organization or the group of people with whom you're working. So you're all leaders. You're all above average, right? Anybody here not above average? Good. This is Lake Wobegon. I used to make a joke about my hospital that all the babies born in our hospital were above average at Beth Israel Hospital, and it was true because it was a proposition I tested scientifically by interviewing grandparents. Yeah, and in all the years I worked at the hospital, never once did a grandparent say, when I said, "How's the new baby?" Never once did they say, "Well, kind of substandard." It was always spectacular, so intelligent, math skills, everything. This is on day 2, so. Like that, here you have a group that's above average, and in fact you are. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. This is a great place to work and full of great people. But like any organization, any complex organization, which I define as any organization having more than 3 people, things get in the way of getting the job done, even though we're very well intentioned and above average. So let me just dive into some stories from the book, and then we'll see where they take us. Any soccer players here, by the way? Okay, good. What's the most important skill in playing soccer? Vision? What? Nothing? Teamwork. Well, that's a thought. Almost. The most important skill is actually controlling the ball when it gets to you. Now, why is that? Okay, for those of you who don't play soccer, or football as we call it in Mexico or elsewhere in the world, this is a really simple game. There are 2 teams playing on the same field. It's a rectangle, and at either end of the rectangle there are goals, and the object of the game is to get the ball into the other team's goal more often than they get into yours. The rest, as Hillel once said, is commentary, right? That's the whole deal. Now, what makes it difficult, and what actually makes it similar to working for a corporation or another institution, is you don't know what the other people are planning to do before the game starts. You don't even know what they're planning to do as the game is going along, because they're constantly changing their strategy and their tactics and their position around the field. You don't even know what the field is going to be like before the game starts. Is it muddy? Is it rutted? Are there tufts of grass that are going to knock the ball awry? You don't know what the wind is going to be like during the course of the game, where the sun is going to be, whether the clouds are going to be covering, whether a dog's going to run across the field in the middle of the game. You don't know what the fans are going to be like. You don't even know what the referees are going to be like. So this is a challenging situation for your 11 players on the field. A constantly changing situation. You don't even know how your own team is going to perform as the game starts. Think of the analogy to an organization. You're a corporation, you're doing really interesting things for the world. I don't know if you've noticed it lately, but there are people who want to compete with you, who have strategies whose whole job in life is to figure out how to weaken you so they can get better, so they can score more goals than you score. There are things going on internally to your organization as well. Was somebody sick yesterday who was going to make a major presentation today? How do you adjust to that? Does somebody in a higher up position here all of a sudden decide, new strategy, we're going that way? How do we react to that? So a soccer game is a wonderful metaphor for corporate life, because you have both exogenous and endogenous changes occurring all the time. And how do you adjust? Well, you adjust by creating a team that's a self-learning organization that can learn in real time to make the changes necessary to succeed. How do you do that? Well, you're the coach. You're the leader of the whole thing, of a group, task force, whatever. You can't do the job. As a coach, you're on the sidelines. You're advising, you're inspiring perhaps. But the players on the team are making the decisions in real time. So what do you need to know as a coach? Okay, back to our little girls. Most important thing, I'm talking to the 11-year-olds one day. These are cute little girls, they're adorable. They're 11, they're feeling their oats, they want to be good at what they do. They love playing soccer, they're out there, they love being with their friends, they love to run around and scream. I'm the coach, I'm the adult, supposedly, on the field. And I say to them, girls, you know, the most important thing in this game is controlling the ball as it gets to us. Because if we don't control it, if it bounces off our foot, guess what? The other team's going to get it. That's not good. We want to control the ball so we can decide whether to pass it, shoot it, dribble, or whatever. And they're nodding. And then I say, but you know what the most important thing is about controlling the ball? It's to think about what you're going to do with it as it approaches you. Because you as adults understand that if we wait until the ball's at my foot, neurologically I can't send a signal from my brain fast enough to deal with what that ball is doing. I have to think about it as it approaches. I don't suppose any of you watched the baseball game last night, but if you notice baseball batters, as a pitch approaches, they actually start swinging way before the ball gets to them. If they wait till it gets to them, it doesn't work. Except for your pitcher who managed to slap one into left field just at the right moment. So I'm saying to the girls, so I want you to think about what you're going to do with the ball before it gets to you. Okay? Okay, coach, we got it. I say, let's try it out. I throw a bunch of balls out on the field. A ball comes rolling towards Margaret, and without thinking about it, bam, she kicks it into the woods. Not even on the field anywhere, into the woods. And I say, Margaret, you weren't thinking about what you were going to do with the ball before it got to you. Oh, no, coach, I was thinking about it. I just hadn't reached a conclusion, she says. Okay, so what's the problem here? The problem here, there was a famous UCLA basketball coach named John Wooden. Anybody remember John Wooden? The best coach in the world, who used to say, you haven't taught it if they haven't learned it. You haven't taught it if they haven't learned it. What did he mean by that? Well, what he meant by that is that students, staff, are a terrific substrate for learning. These are people who want to do well. They want to do good for the world. People here want to do good for the world. You can trust them to want to do well and want to do good. Your job as coach or teacher is to help them learn what they need to become a learning organization or substantively whatever they need. And if they haven't learned it, and they're well-intentioned, thoughtful people, it means you haven't taught it the right way. It's not their fault for not having learned it. It's your fault as the coach. So what was my problem? What did I do wrong with this group of girls? What do you think? What did I do wrong?
You asked them to think but not decide. You asked them to think and not decide.
I asked them to think and not decide. But how did I instruct them? I gave them a lecture. I engaged in didactic training of 11-year-olds. Think about this. Anyone had 11-year-olds? Anyone remember being 11? Did you ever listen to a lecture from a teacher? And here I am trying to teach a kinesthetic skill by giving a lecture. Anyone take dance lessons ever? Yeah. You don't learn by a lecture, right, Kat? It doesn't work. You actually have to do the thing. So what approach could I have taken with these girls? I could have said to them, I could have just posed the question. I could have engaged in a Socratic approach. I could have said, hey kids, what do you think about when the ball is rolling towards you? One of them probably would have said, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with the ball when it gets to me. And then I could have said, gee, does that sound like a good idea? And the others would have said, yeah, why? And someone would have said, because if you wait till it gets to you, you muff it up, it doesn't work well. Oh, I'd say. And then I could say to them, gee, that feels like an important thing for us all to learn to do. What kind of games or exercises could you invent to help learn how to do this? And then they would have invented the games. And then we'd play the game for a while, and I'd say, how do we know if this is working or not? And then they would have invented the metric of success. And they would have judged their own performance against the metric they invented. They would have held themselves accountable to the standard of performance that they invented. Whoa. What would I have done as a coach? I just would have asked dumb questions. What could we do? Why would that work? What else could we do? All right. So let's think about it from a leadership perspective more broadly now. Your job as coach is to teach. You're teaching lots of different things in an organization or on a sporting team. Your job is to teach. To teach well, you have to have some theory of learning. If you don't have a theory of how people learn, how do you design your curriculum or your pedagogy? There's a theory of learning that I've been using over the years that I borrowed from someone at MIT, a professor at MIT. And she actually does machine learning, which is really interesting. Nonetheless, she has this concept of learning. Stage one of learning. The squeaking in the background, by the way, is my grandson, Liam. He likes to sing. Theory of learning. Step one of learning is interest. This is obvious. I decide I want to learn a new musical instrument. Why? I'm interested in it. I decide I want to learn a different kind of computer programming. Some of you maybe do that stuff here. I'm interested in it. Good. Next phase, after interest, distress. Distress. What's distress about? Distress is about the fact that we are creatures of habit, we human beings. There's probably some evolutionary reason for that. I don't know. Probably because the first time we saw a saber-toothed tiger, We wanted to remember it for the next time and the next time. But habit gets in our way when we're trying to learn something new. Why? Because when you learn something new, you have to establish a new framework for whatever it is you're trying to learn, whether it's a physical skill or an emotional skill or an intellectual skill. Getting through that phase is hard. How many of you have ever felt you've been learning something new and you hit a plateau, right? Everybody feels that way, right? What's the plateau about? We're getting in our way of learning the new thing. I had a wonderful math professor. I was an undergraduate at MIT. In those days, anybody could get into MIT. His name was Giancarlo Rota, a wonderful Italian professor, talking like this all the time, a lot of gestures and so on. By the way, what do they call it when an Italian has a broken arm? A speech impediment. Okay? Okay. So Gianco was that kind of guy. And he was wonderful. He was a warm, kind man and a great teacher and very flamboyant. And one day he has 400 of us in an auditorium, 400 MIT freshmen in an auditorium, and he's teaching us a new theorem, and we're not getting it. He can see we're not getting it because he's looking at our blank faces. And so what does he do? He tries again. He comes around to the problem a different way, tries a different approach. We're not getting it. At this point, the rather emotional Gianco gets upset, angry, and he takes his chalk and he throws it on the ground and he says, "Look, learning is overcoming your prejudices. Learning is overcoming your prejudices," he says to us. And we all go, doing, like this. And we say, "Oh yeah." And we learn the theorem because he shocked us through. He used the fact that we were distressed, that we were uncomfortable, and he figured out a way to push us through that. What's the final phase after interest, distress? It's pleasure. You learn the new thing, you feel good about it. What's your job as leader or coach or teacher? It's to have sufficient empathy with the people whom you're coaching so that you understand where they are in the learning process so that you can gently apply or release pressure as needed. Empathy is the most important attribute for a leader. Now let's think about leaders you've known. Let's think about coaches you've had and how seldom you see empathy. How more often you see a highly directive approach that says, "I'm in charge and I'm going to tell you what to do and you better learn this, and if you don't, I'm going to blame you." So let's approach it a different way. Empathy. Next phase of this whole learning process. Oh, by the way, in an organization, what makes empathy interesting is that not only do you have to do it one-on-one, you might have to do it with a whole group of people. Because there's a whole coalition of people in your organization who are having to learn at the same time at different speeds. So that makes it complicated and takes practice. Let's turn now to the question of mistakes. Simple lesson here, mistakes are to be cherished. Cherished. All right, this is about Tova. My daughter Sarah back there knows Tova well. One day, Tova, at age 28 last year, comes to me and she says, "Do you remember that play I made when we were in a tournament in Connecticut when I was 14? She's 28 and she's asking me this question. "Do you remember the play I made in a tournament in Connecticut when I was 14? I said, "Yeah, I do," because I remember every tournament. And Tova, I said, "You made a great play. You were the sweeper on the field, the last defender back. Our goalie came out, a shot came in the goal, towards the goal. Our goalie swatted it out into the field, but the other team got possession of the ball, and someone took a shot point blank right at the goal, and you, Tova, stood in front of the goal and chested the ball down and cleared it away. It was a great defensive play." She says, "I don't remember that one." I said, "Which one do you remember?" She says, "Well, the one I remember is I was playing sweeper and a ball comes flying towards the goal through the air and I tried to head it out, and instead I deflected it into our goal for the winning goal in the game in the tournament." I said, "I don't remember that one." And she says, "I was devastated. I was sitting on the grass after the game, sobbing my heart out, knowing that I caused us to lose the tournament. And you came up to me as coach and you said, 'Tova, don't worry about it. You're a great defender.'" "I am?" I said, "Yeah. Only the best defenders go out after every single ball with a lot of energy and intent, And every now and then, it deflects off of them and goes into the goal. Don't worry about it. You're a great defender. So she brushed herself off at age 14, walked away with her head up high, smiling, saying to herself, I'm a great defender. Now, she remembered this 14 years later. 14 years later. And she was paying it forward to people in the organizations in which she worked. What was she paying forward? She was paying forward the idea that when someone has made a mistake and is going through a hard time, a simple word of sympathy or empathy can go a long way and help them through that phase and help them learn from the experience. So how do we learn from the experience? We don't blame, we don't punish. As we like to say in the hospital world, we want to be hard on the problem, but not hard on the person. We want to say of the person, anybody could have made that mistake. And indeed, as you think about organizations, as you think about mistakes that are made, in general, it's true that although a specific person may have made the mistake, chances are anybody could have in the organization. Why? Because most of the errors that occur in an organization, whether it's a hospital or a place like this, are a result of systemic problems in the way work is organized in that organization, and not because someone is maliciously trying to make a mistake. I want to give you an example from our hospital. A patient woke up from surgery, orthopedic surgery one day, looked down at her ankle and said, "Why is the bandage on my right leg instead of my left leg?" And it was at that moment that her surgeon, standing right there, realized he had operated on the wrong ankle. There's a technical term for this in healthcare. It's called not good. Okay? You now can be a doctor. You want to operate on the correct limb. Now, this happens a lot in the world. In America, I think there are 2 or 3 or 4 wrong site surgeries that occur every week. A lot are more serious than the one that this surgeon did. Wrong breasts removed, wrong testicles removed, or in the case of a poor guy from Wisconsin with kidney cancer, the wrong kidney removed. Think about that. How on earth can this possibly happen? Is it because doctors are misanthropes who want to hurt people? No. In fact, doctors are among the most well-intentioned people in the world. They've devoted their lives to alleviating human suffering caused by disease. They do not intentionally remove the wrong breast, or the wrong testicle, or the wrong kidney, or operate on the wrong ankle. How does it happen? Well, in this case, what happened is that the surgeon had failed to do what's called a timeout before the procedure. What's a timeout? Everybody in the OR stands around the patient and says, "What's the name of the patient? What are we here to do today? What limb are we operating on? Is the limb marked so that we know we're operating on the correct limb?" He had not done that. Why? I'll tell you that in a second, but he had not done that. So one of my trustees in the hospital said to me, "What are you going to do to punish this doctor?" And I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, you should punish him. He didn't follow our timeout procedure." And I said, "Look, this guy is already feeling more distress from his mistake and is punishing himself more than anything we could ever do to him. Why do we need to punish him?" And then a colleague of mine said, "And furthermore, if we want to establish a culture in this organization that encourages people to admit mistakes and to admit near misses so that we can constantly improve as an organization, if we start punishing people for mistakes that anyone could have made, reporting will go underground. We'll never hear about what's going wrong. And we don't want that. We want to be a learning organization." And I said, "Yes, that's right." By the way, the trustee who was trying to get me to punish this fellow, who said, "Okay, well, if you say so, I guess we don't want to punish him, but in my field, we would punish him." What field was he in? Investment banking. Yeah. I don't know about you, but as I read the newspapers, it seems to me that when investment bankers make mistakes, they get bonuses, except in Iceland where they get put in jail. But here. But what I want to do is describe to you the nature of that error to help you understand even further why we didn't want to punish this guy. So, why did the surgeons skip the timeout? It was a procedure that he hadn't done in a while, a fairly complicated procedure on an ankle. He had studied it before the surgery and was rehearsing it in his head over and over again because he didn't want to get it wrong. So he was distracted by the task at hand. In his view, the task at hand, and doctors and nurses are very task-oriented, the task at hand was to do the surgery right. So I think we could forgive him for forgetting a step along the way, this procedural step along the way. What about other people in the OR? The anesthesiologist, in her previous case, had had a near miss. She had almost administered the wrong medication to a patient with potentially fatal consequences, but caught herself in time. And she was still stewing over the fact that she had almost made that mistake. Now, if you or I made a mistake like that, we would probably immediately tell 5 or 10 people to get it off our chest, right? Doctors don't do that. Admitting mistakes on the part of medical people is viewed as a sign of weakness. It tends to generate disdain from their colleagues, even though those same colleagues would, in their brain, be saying, "There, but for the grace of God go I." Okay? So she kept this to herself, and she was fretting about this as she went into the OR. So she forgot about the timeout. What about the nurse in the OR, the circulating nurse, the person who's supposed to document, check the checklist that the timeout had taken place? Well, the circulating nurse had left the OR for a few minutes to get something from another room, had come back, the surgery had started, and therefore he assumed the timeout had taken place. So he checked the checklist. After all, a checklist is meant to be checked, right? Started, check. All right. It gets better than that. It gets better than that. The correct limb was marked. Yeah. It was marked, but it was draped. Why didn't the surgeon look for the mark? Why didn't anybody else in the room look for a mark? And here we get to a concept called normalization of deviance. This is a cognitive error that occurs throughout the world. The classic example is the Columbia Space Shuttle. Some of you may not remember this. The space shuttle, as it was flying back to Earth because some heat shields, tiles had come off, burned up, killing all aboard. Why did that happen? During the takeoff, some foam from the launch pad had broken off and had hit the heat shield and broken off the tiles. Wasn't the first time, however, that foam had broken off during a launch. It had happened at least twice before. The first time it happened, rocket takes off, the booster takes off, foam is flying around. The NASA engineers say, "What's all this foam flying around? That's not supposed to happen." Gee, we can't figure it out. It's not part of the design specs. We can't figure it out. But, well, it doesn't seem to do any harm. Second time, same thing. Takes off, foam flying around. Third time, they discovered that a piece of foam going 150 miles an hour has the same amount of momentum as a cinder block when it hits heat tiles, ceramic tiles, and damaged the space shuttle, burned up coming down. This phenomenon of accepting defects is called normalization of deviance. Normalization of deviance. Something goes wrong, we don't see a consequence from it. Even though we know it's wrong, we don't act to fix it until a catastrophe occurs. In the pre-op area in our operating rooms, where marking of body parts takes place, there had been a shortage for several months of the indelible markers that are used to mark body parts. So the doctors and nurses had gotten used to using ballpoint pens to mark body parts instead of the indelible markers. Problem with that is when you swab betadine on a limb that's been marked with a ballpoint pen, it washes off the ink. surgeons had gotten used to the idea that they would not see a mark on the body part. Normalization of deviance. Isn't this fascinating? So now who do you blame? Who do you blame? Everybody who was in the pre-op area for several months who never reported that this was a problem? Everybody who had marked a limb with a ballpoint pen? Every surgeon who had had a case previously who didn't see a mark because the ballpoint pen had been used? Should it be the supply department because they didn't provide enough markers? So as you see, after a while, if you go down this path, there's nobody to blame and everybody to blame. But the point is, we don't want to talk about blame. We want to be a learning organization. We want to be a learning organization. Now, how do we get to that? We get to that by creating a culture which enables people on the front line, encourages and empowers them to call out problems as they see them, and requires leaders in the organization, managers and other leaders in the organization, to be responsive to those call-outs so the problems get fixed. And I'll end with a story about that that I think will help crystallize it for you. But let's go back to the 11-year-olds first. So this is about superstars. We had a young girl on our team named Brooke, who was a spectacular soccer player. In particular, she was a spectacular dribbler. She could take the ball and dribble around anything. But the strategy of the team was not to have a single player dribble down the field. The strategy of the team is to pass to one another, because even a great player is going to hit opposition from opposing players. And the way you get down the field is you pass the ball to your teammates. When someone's open, you pass it to, and you get the ball and you pass again. Now, Brooke understood this, and she was a great team player and very unselfish, would always pass the ball to other teammates just the way she was supposed to. And our team had a spectacular record. Well, in this particular day, we were playing in a tournament. These are 11-year-olds, and the team against which we were playing wasn't as good as we were, and so they packed the defense on the field. They put all their players right in front of the goal. So our normal practice of going down the field, pass, 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 shoot, wasn't working because they would block the shot. There were just too many of them in the way. And our girls were getting really frustrated, and at halftime it was 0-0. It's a tournament game. You got to win in tournaments. So in front of all the girls, I say to Brooke, Brooke, you're a spectacular dribbler, and normally I want you to pass to other players. It's part of our team approach. But just this once, next time you get the ball, just walk it into the goal. She says, what do you mean? Slight grin appearing on her mouth. I said, get the ball, dribble through those other players, and just score. Okay, coach, she says, I can do this. So we start up. She gets the ball on the 35-yard line, toot, 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 scores. I mean, it took 10 seconds. High fives from the whole team, right? Now, if Brooke had usually played that way, there would have been a lot of resentment. But because the whole team understood it was part of the strategy to use the attributes of our superstar, it was acceptable. It was more than acceptable. It was great. So, lesson one here. Every organization has superstars. It's fine to use their attributes that are different from other people as long as it's part of the team strategy. Lesson two, a little more subtle. We can find superstars everywhere in the organization. Every single person in a place like this has certain characteristics, skills, or attributes that are different from other people, that can be brought to bear to carry out the purposes of the organization if we give that person the freedom to offer those skills. I want to tell you about Gloria Martinez in our hospital. Gloria was a transporter. A transporter is one of the lowest paid jobs in the hospital. It's an entry-level job. Transporters push beds around and wheelchairs with patients, delivering them from one place to the other, and also deliver specimens from the various departments to the pathology lab to be analyzed. This is like a no-brain operation, right? And, I pick it up, I walk over, I deliver it. Gloria one day noticed that specimens from our GI department were not getting delivered consistently to the path lab. They would be lost occasionally. And she took it upon herself to tell her supervisor about this, because she figured it was important for those specimens to be delivered. Now, those of you of a certain age who've had colonoscopies, and the rest of you will someday, this is a wonderful procedure you'll really get to enjoy, know that the idea of a colonoscopy is to take a look at your colon from the inside, and if the doctor sees a polyp growing on the inside of your colon, she clips it off, and they send it to the lab because they want to know if it's cancerous or precancerous. In today's world, we can actually eliminate colon cancer by this kind of early detection. So if a sample gets lost on the way to the path lab, and someone is not diagnosed with precancerous polyps or cancerous polyps, a year or two later, they're going to have colon cancer. So it's an important test. And Gloria, maybe not knowing why it was important, understood that it was important for these samples to get delivered. And so when they weren't getting delivered, she called out this problem to her supervisor. Now, I don't want to stereotype here, but let me tell you about Gloria. Gloria is a recent immigrant from Latin America. Her primary language is Spanish. The family is not well off. She's a high school educated person. I would suggest to you that it's highly likely, I've met her family, it's highly likely that her large extended family of cousins and uncles and aunts and parents and grandparents does not say to Gloria every day when she goes to work, make sure you find something wrong in the work environment and make a fuss about it. No, more likely they say to her, you're lucky to have a job, keep your head down. Right? But Gloria felt comfortable because of the culture we had established in our hospital, calling out this problem. Her supervisor, her leader, her coach had also been trained so that when Gloria called out the problem, he said in a kind, pleasant way, he did not say, I'm busy right now, tell me about it later. No, he said, thank you so much, Gloria, for mentioning this. This is important, we're going to get on it. And as a result of her call out, that one time, we totally revamped the way specimens were tracked and collected in our hospital. Gloria personally probably saved some lives. She may have saved as many lives as some of the GI doctors, if you think about it. Around this time, we had created what we called our Caller Outer of the Month Award. This was an award from our Board of Trustees to acknowledge someone in the company who had called out a problem, not solved a problem, but called out a problem, because we wanted to encourage these call-outs. Gloria gets the first award, which is a letter from me and 2 tickets to Fenway Park to watch the Red Sox. That's a baseball team we have on the other coast. And although this year they really weren't a baseball team, they were something else. Yeah, they were awful. They were awful. It was over by July 4th. So here's Gloria getting this award. Imagine her, 23 years old, her background, her not so good English, getting an award from the suits, the people on the board, the real estate people, the attorneys, the finance people. It's pretty intimidating. We give her the award and she says the following in these words. Thank you so much for this award, which I accept on behalf of all of the transporters who work here, who believe that our job is to deliver the kind of care to patients that we would want for members of our own family. I had board members crying when she said that. Why? Because she had codified elegantly in one sentence the purpose of our hospital. That all those board members were volunteering their time and effort and money for, to create an institution that would deliver the kind of care to any patient that you or I would want for a member of our family. And Gloria got it. For me, it was one of the most satisfying days working in that hospital. Why? Because it indicated that the cultural change we had made in the hospital in terms of everybody feeling ownership with regard to the purpose of the organization, feeling empowered to call out problems, to make suggestions, and to have a leadership team in the organization that was responsive to those call-outs had succeeded. It was a wonderful moment. So let me stop there with stories, and we can take some questions or observations. Let me just summarize. Let's think about it. Your job as leader, you're the coach. Your job is to help people learn, to create a learning organization that can respond to what's ever going on, internally and externally. To think about that learning cycle of interest, distress, and pleasure. To have empathy for people as individuals and groups of people, to help them through the learning cycle. To cherish mistakes, not to blame people for mistakes, to help them through the mistakes and to help them learn from the mistakes. And then finally, to recognize that everybody's a potential superstar. We don't have to do a draft choice. Who's our recruiter over there? We don't have to do a draft choice. Everybody can contribute to the purpose of the organization. But fundamentally, to understand that your job as leader is to believe that the people with whom you're working want to do well in their job and want to do good for the world, and that you can trust them. That they will actually hold themselves accountable to a standard of performance and care and diligence in a much more vital and real way than you can ever hold them accountable as their leader. You can't do it from the top. They have to feel it internally. They will feel it internally if you create an environment that allows them to do what they want to do in the first place, to do well and to do good. Okay, I'm going to stop right there and see if there are any questions.
I have a question about empathy. You talked about that in leadership, it's important to have empathy about to everyone. But there is also a leadership style which says about a healthy mixture of fear. And respect is also needed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, some leaders do rule through fear, and it can be extremely effective. And the organization can do all right for some time. Generally, though, you'll find that the organization will not do well for a long period of time, or when there are structural changes that occur in that industry. And the reason for that is no single person can be knowledgeable enough to anticipate all those changes and to design where the organization should go in the future. No one is good enough. The Soviet Union used to try to, the Politburo used to try to run the Soviet economy from on high. It works for a while, but it doesn't work after a while. The best ideas in an organization tend to come from people on the front line who notice a problem or notice that a competitor is doing something else and says, maybe we should do something about that. So it can work for a while. Some people like it. By the way, some people like working in an environment where the boss is heavy-handed and makes them fearful. And some people like being in a marriage or a relationship where there's an abusive relationship as well. It takes all type. I don't particularly like that, and I think most people don't respond that way. And I certainly think that most professional people, highly educated, intelligent, thoughtful people, do not like that at all. The reason they're professional people is because they have enough sense of self that they think they can self-motivate, and they can. Okay?
There are people who intentionally make mistakes or who intentionally do bad things. So what do you do when you catch those people who are outliers, maybe?
Right, yeah. So there are people who intentionally make mistakes and cause damage. I would suggest to you, first of all, it's a very, very, very small percentage. Most people are not misanthropes and jerks. Most people are like you and me. We want to do well, we want to do good, and when we make a mistake, we tend to feel badly about it. And we hope not to do it again. If you believe that someone really intentionally is sabotaging an organization or a team or whatever, out of negligence or intent, real intent. They really want to destroy it, get rid of them. Get rid of them. Zero tolerance for that. As I say, very small percentage. I think what you'll find, though, most of the time when people are not performing in a job, that it relates to one of a few things. The most common problem I've seen when people make a mistake or are not performing in a job, the most common problem is that something's going wrong at home. They're having a problem with a sick relative, a spouse, a child, whatever it is, and they can't get it out of their mind and they're not focused correctly on their work. And our job at that point is to help them through that, just as you would help a friend. Problem number two, they don't really know what to do in the job. They don't have the skills. Why? Well, maybe we haven't trained them enough. There was a nurse in Brazil who made a fatal mistake in a clinic in Rio de Janeiro. She's now being tried for involuntary manslaughter. The real problem was she wasn't trained properly for the procedure she was told to do. She actually did not know that she was incompetent to do that procedure. Whose fault is that? Is that her fault? I don't think so. I think it's her leader's fault. So, so the second category of problems, if somebody doesn't know how to do the job right, let's train them. It might be, however, that they're not trainable in that particular skill. And we have to admit that some people are not. I mean, I'm never going to be a Major League Baseball pitcher, no matter how many times I would try. Let's move them to a different job. Let's find a job that is more suited to their characteristics, their skills, their aptitudes. Sometimes there's a problem in the work environment in which somebody is placed, that they're not getting along with other people or with their supervisor or whatever. That's a difficult problem that requires some counseling of everybody, usually. And then once you get through that whole list, I would say that's 95% of the cases. Then in a very small amount of cases, you know, this person really shouldn't be here. Not because they're a misanthrope or a jerk, but they're just not suited to the place. And then we should ask them to leave. As often as not, I've found that when it gets to that point, the person is so relieved to leave that they feel like you're doing them a favor. So that's my take on that. Thanks for raising it.
For the most part, I think it's true that people prefer kind of a egalitarian and autonomous work environment, but they've also shown that there's kind of like a sliding scale. So when in very stressful situations or when things kind of take a turn for the south, people actually prefer aggressive leaders, top-down leaders. So I'm wondering, in your personal experience, how to recognize that point, and if you have any personal examples of when you've had to kind of change from the egalitarian, empathetic model to more of like a top-down, you're the leader.
Yeah, I actually have not found that to be the case. I know people talk about it that way, but we had an example in our hospital. Kat talked about it briefly. During 2009, the economy tumbled. Revenue to our hospital went through the floor. Instead of projecting a $20 million loss, by halfway through the year, we were projecting, a gain. By halfway through the year, we were projecting a $20 million loss. So a $40 million shift in 6 months. My CFO and COO came to me and said, we need to lay off 400 people. That's how we have to solve this problem. And I said, no, I'd rather not. Let's talk to folks and see what ideas we could get to solve this problem. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And they said, no, you don't understand. We need to act quickly. We need to identify the people. And this was March 1st. By April 1st, have it in place. Because we're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars per week. And I said, well, let's just give it a try. So what did I do? I called people together in town meetings. I had the CFO explain the financial situation in about 5 minutes. And then I said to the staff, look, we have some options here. One is I could assert authority and eliminate a number of hundreds of positions here. The other thing we could do is together decide on sacrifices that we would all take, small sacrifices we would all take to solve this problem. whether it's pay cuts or freezes or whatever it is or other things. I'd rather do that because we're in the middle of a recession right now. The unemployment rate was about 8%. If I fire one of you, it's going to be really hard for you to get another job. And at an 8% unemployment rate, statistically 1 in 12 of your spouses is currently out of work, and I don't want to create non-working families. So what do you say about us coming together and coming up with ideas? And then they're nodding and they're smiling, they're feeling good about it. And then I say to them, I also want to run another idea by you to see what you think about it. You know, there are people in this hospital, the transporters, the food service workers, the housekeepers, who don't earn very much money to start with. What would you think about the idea of exempting them from any of the sacrifices the rest of us take, understanding that it means that everybody else is going to have to take a slightly bigger sacrifice to compensate for those several hundreds of people? The room burst into applause. Burst into applause. It was a very moving moment. So what did we do? So we set up chat rooms. You know, I have my blog, I have email, I've been walking around town meetings, and I said, send me your ideas. Send me your ideas. And so I got thousands of ideas. The book tells you how many we got. And then a week or so later, I put out a memo, an email to the staff saying, here are the major ideas I've received. Here's how they would work or not work. Here's a smaller group that I'm considering for the future that I'll decide upon. Let me know what you think about those. They commented on those. And then a week or so later, I put out the final memo saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Thanks for your suggestions. I couldn't adopt all of your suggestions. In adopting a suggestion or not adopting one of your suggestions, it doesn't mean that I didn't think you had a good idea. It just means that my final responsibility here is to make the final decisions on this, and I have to feel comfortable in the ones I've chosen. Here's what I've done. We avoided the layoffs. Avoided the layoffs. Then the other thing I did is I did just a Survey Monkey thing a few weeks later saying, okay, if we start to get better here financially, which of the things would you like restored first, as it's possible to do that? And I took the results of that survey, and as the economy improved and our hospital got better, I'd send out a note like 4 months later, oh, things are better, we can now restore the 401k match. Thanks very much, that was the first on your list. 3 months later, it would be the next thing. And after about 8 months, we were doing so much better that I actually gave everybody in the hospital a $500 bonus. So there's the situation. I mean, this was a high-stress situation. When a hospital loses money, it's not good, because our only source of money is what we actually earn. And I could have taken the hierarchical approach. People would have accepted it. They would have said, well, he has to do what he has to do. But think of what we would have lost. First of all, 400 people wouldn't have had jobs. Secondly, we would have lost the opportunity to come together as a community, or as we said, as a family, to make this thing work. And in essence, to take care of ourselves in the same way we took care of patients. So it was a huge morale boost for the organization. Plus, because people had participated in the selection process, they bought into them. They said, well, this is the right way to do it. Now, around this time, I was speaking to a president of a major university that was going through a similar period, and suggested to this person that this university might adopt a similar approach. And the response of this president was, well, participation is one thing, pandemonium is another. That was the view. My own board chair said to me, you know, I wouldn't have had the nerve to do what you did. And I said to him, Steve, why does this take any nerve? I mean, I'm asking advice. I'm getting participation. I'm making the final decision. But I'm engaging people. And by the way, many of them will come up with ideas that I hadn't thought of. And he said, yeah, but I wouldn't have had the nerve to do that in my firm. He was a managing partner somewhere. It would have felt like losing control. And I said, well, any feeling that you have control is a mirage to start with. You don't. No one controls this place. I know the founders of this organization might feel that way from time to time, but they would admit privately, I think, that they don't have control either. What do you have, 60,000 people now? Something like that? No one controls this place. No, you know that. No one even controls your own division, even if you've got a pretty hierarchical kind of management. No, you control what you do every day. And what makes you good at what you do institutionally is that you take on that responsibility, you feel a sense of engagement, creativity, and purpose, and you do stuff that helps to satisfy the corporate mission. That's what we want to have there. So I would say to you, when in doubt, back off, ask everybody what they think. The worst that happens is they don't come up with any good ideas. But you've asked. The best that happens is they've come up with great ideas. They're there to help you implement them. You make them feel good. They solve your problem. It's not bad. All right. Are we at the end of our allotted time? Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Oh, let me just say, of course, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those things. I have a wonderful blog. It used to be called Running a Hospital. It's now called Not Running a Hospital. And I'd love to have you be in touch in any way in the future. And for those of you who want to hang around for a few minutes, I'm happy to sign your book. Thank you for having me. Thank you.